All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Singer, and I'm a former New York City high school teacher. I'm currently a teacher educator, and I'm an historian at Hofstra University, which is a college near New York City. I'm speaking to you from the East Coast of the United States. I met some of you at the Global Just Recovery Gathering, and I'm very pleased that I was invited to speak with you today. I know it is morning in the Philippines. In New York, it is almost midnight, and it's still yesterday. So I'm yesterday, you're today. My topic is I'm going to focus on youth activists and how they change history. Because you are the youth activists who will be changing history. The cartoon and live movie versions of 16-year-old Mulan, a battling Chinese heroine, they're great fun, but the character is fictional. It is actually based on a Chinese folktale, and there's no evidence that Mulan ever existed. However, there are many historical examples of young people like you who organized to change the world. I'd like to mention a few of them first. This is a statue in France of Joan of Arc, Jeanne d'Arc. She is one of the best known of the young people who helped to change the world. She grew up in the eastern part of France, in a region now known as Lorraine, during the 15th century, that's the 1400s. When she was 19 years old, Jean led a French army that was involved in the 100 Years' War. Now, I know you're studying math, and you're probably a better mathematician than they were, because their 100-year war really went on for about 120 years. Now, under Joan's leadership, French troops successfully broke the English army that was seizing the city of New Orleans. So they call her the Maiden of Orleans. At the end of the 19th century, Indonesia, which is one of your neighbors, was a colony of the Netherlands. We also call them the Dutch. Kut Nyat Dien was a 25-year-old guerrilla leader from Aceh, a province in the northern tip of the island of Sumatra. And like Jeanne d'Arc, Kut Nyat Dien is now considered a national heroine. Truce and Freddie Stegen were Dutch teenagers during World War II, and they were involved in the anti-Nazi resistance, along with their friend Honey. They were teenagers. They gave out leaflets on bicycles to rally Dutch resistance to the Nazi occupation. As the war and the German occupation continued, the young women actually blew up bridges and rail lines with dynamite. And the three women also smuggled Jewish children out of concentration camps and helped them to reach safety. Professor Goodwin spoke about Hong Kong. In Hong Kong today, high school students challenge undemocratic practices by the Chinese government. They arrive to class wearing gas masks sometimes, and they join their hands, they lock hands to form a human chain during strikes. Two of the most powerful examples of youth activism in promoting change are the role played by secondary school students in the campaign against apartheid in South Africa and in the African American civil rights movement in the United States. By 1976, much of the adult leadership of the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa was either in prison or they had been murdered by police and military force. In June 1976, tens of thousands of secondary school students marched in a Soweto protest against a government decision to force their schools to use Afrikaans as the language of instruction instead of English. The student protest and police response sparked international condemnation of apartheid and contributed to its downfall and majority rule in South Africa. June 16th, the day of the Soweto protest and police attack, is now a national holiday in South Africa. It's called Youth Day. Youth activists can be very brave. The May 1963 Children's Crusade in Birmingham, Alabama, had a similar cathartic impact on African American civil rights movement in the United States, with adults threatened with losing jobs for participating in protests, and many of the movement leaders in jail, including Martin Luther King. Activists enlisted students, including young children, for marches demanding the desegregation of Birmingham parks and public facilities. The young people were attacked by police with high-pressure hoses and dogs when they tried to enter a park that had a sign that said white only. The police assault was broadcast on television and widely covered in the press. It was a turning point in the African American struggle for civil rights in the United States, and it was led by students. Young people have always been at the center of the demand that governments and industry respond to climate change. 1992, a group of Canadian 12 and 13-year-olds, I guess some of you are 12 and 13, they represented the Environmental Children's Organization, and they traveled to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to address a United Nations Earth Summit. Severin Kulis Suzuki told the audience of attendees at the summit, "I am fighting for my future. I am here to speak for all generations to come." Severin challenged delegates as parents who should be able to confront their children by saying, "Everything is going to be all right. We're doing the best we can, and it's not the end of the world." But I do not think you can say that to us anymore. In 2020, youth climate activists, Vanessa Nakati of Uganda, Yulissa Marie of Germany, Greta Thunberg, and Isabel Axelsson of Sweden, Ukina Till of Switzerland, testified and lobbied at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, for immediate climate action by governments, corporations, and financial institutions. That's like banks. There is a strong tradition of youth activism in the Philippines. At the age of 27, Emilio Magdalo Aguinaldo, I'm sure you know his name better than me, was a leader of the Philippines independence struggle first against Spanish colonialism and then against the United States occupation. In the 1970s, students were at the forefront of the movement challenging the undemocratic government of Fernando Marcos and continue the United States' use of the Philippines to launch military ventures in Southeast Asia. This picture shows a Philippine rally of the youth strike against climate change. And I wonder if some of you were there. I was marching in New York City with students. In 2019, CNN Philippines featured young Philippine climate activists. Joanna Sustento lost her family to Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. She became one of the climate crisis's most visible faces in the Philippines, demanding accountability from fossil fuel companies and protesting against oil drilling in the Arctic. Krishna Ariola was the lead convener of the Youth for Climate Hope, a coalition of Philippine youth promoting climate action. Mitzi Janelle Tan was one of the principal speakers at the recent Global Just Recovery gathering. B. Tulagan is the East Asia Regional Field Organizer for 350.org. When we finally are able to reverse climate change, a big reason will be because of the activism of the young people like you, especially the young people from the Philippines. Although he was initially a climate skeptic, partly as a response to young activists, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte now acknowledges the imminent threat of climate change to the Philippines and describes responding to climate change as the Philippine nation's top priority. Now, on the left, that was his speech. I believe it was a Tagalog, and I'm not going to try to read it. In English, which I can read, at first I did not believe climate change, but now the rains coming from the heavens are heavy due to the warming of the planet. The Philippines, as much the world, faces many issues today. I am heartened by the country's and push for democracy and climate change movements with leadership from young people. I am a strong advocate for the Deweyan project approach to teaching and learning, which is a big reason I am so impressed by the students and teachers at John Dewey School for Children in Manila. Students learn by doing, and your school is committed to engaging all students in groups and individual activities. John Dewey was very concerned with promoting democracy through education. That was one of his most important books. He taught and wrote during an era when the world was involved in 2 world wars and authoritarian dictators were robbing people of fundamental rights, including perpetrating genocide in Europe. So For him, democracy and education were crucial for a better world. Japan occupied the Philippines for 3 years during World War II, and an estimated 500,000 Filipinos died. But that did not stop Philippine resistance forces. By the end of the war, 250,000 guerrilla fighters were organized in more than 250 units, and Philippine resistance fighters had liberated half of the country. And you'll notice from the picture that these Philippine resistance fighters were young women. John Dewey believed that schools needed to combine the project approach with social activism. According to Dewey, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Students learn to be active citizens, defending democracy by being active citizens in a democratic society. Students learn to be climate change activists, concerned with the survival of the planet by being climate change activists. The role of teachers in this approach to education is to create democratic learning communities where students are introduced to possibility and to support responsible student activism. We don't all have to become Joan of Arc, Hanny, Truce, Frida, Cotton, Amelia. But our schools can help students learn to be more like Vanessa, Greta, Louisa Marie, Isabel, and Lucina, the climate activists who went to Davos, Switzerland to pressure governments and industry to protect our planet. To paraphrase the American anthropologist Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of youth climate activists can change the world. In fact, you already have. I want to close with one of my favorite inspirational songs, because we all need a song to get our struggle juices flowing. It is by the Jamaica reggae singer, Bob Marley. Let me see if I can play it so you can actually hear it. Get up for your rights. For your rights. Stand up for your rights. Don't give up the fight. Don't give up the fight. Don't give up the fight. I'm finished. Are there other thoughts or questions? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Keisha.
Thank you so much for that truly inspiring and informative sharing, Dr. Singer. We truly learned a lot about how the youth throughout history have taken a stand and changed the course of history and make the world a better place. Truly, education is needed to nurture a generation that is ready to stand up and preserve what we as humans hold dear, like our rights, our democracy, and our planet. If you have any questions for Dr. Singer, we encourage you to type them in the chat box, and we will read the questions for you.
A very good question. I think it's from your principal. I became an activist when I was in high school. I was in high school in the 1960s. And in the 1960s, the United States was involved in the war in Vietnam. And it was interesting. We had a debate in English class. And I originally was on the side supporting US involvement in Vietnam. But during the course of the debate, I began to change my mind. And then in social studies history class, we had another debate. And this time I was on the anti-war side. So I started going to the protest marches when I was 17. And what's interesting, my father, at the time, forbade me to go. He said, I don't want you to go to the marches. But by the time I was 20 and I was in college, my father used to go and he would march with me. So I was very involved in the anti-war movement. I also became involved in the civil rights movement at the time because I recognized, along with other young people, that if we were going to change American policy, it was insufficient for students to do it. We had to go out into communities to work with people. And so I started to become a community organizer as well, and eventually fought for education and civil rights activities. Enrico asked, what is the importance of childhood activism? Does a child have to have an effect on the movement? I worked with a daycare center in a community in Brooklyn for a long time. And we involved young children in activist programs because we realized young children had a sense of what was fair and what was unfair. And many of them had difficult lives and they recognized the problems that they faced. So we began to organize the school children, elementary, middle school, secondary. I was primarily responsible for the secondary school students to fight for better educational opportunity for all. And what we found was that political leaders, when young people who could articulate why school was so important, they could hear them. So it was crucial to fighting for justice and for education, for the young people to be involved. Now, someone asked about school equality. In the United States, we do not have educational equality either. In the United States, some children who are more affluent, they can go to private schools, they go to schools in communities that are much better prepared. And COVID has been horrible because so many children have been left behind. I think a major fight in the United States going on today is for racial and social justice. And I think it will involve fighting for educational equality because we do not have that in the United States. Brent De La Cruz asked, why are many activists seen as rebels for simply speaking up? I think that's a very important question. I always teach young people we have to be responsible as activists. But even when we're responsible, we can be dismissed as rebels because we are challenging powerful interests in the country. As Greta said in Davos, we're challenging in our conference, we are facing people with great power and great wealth who do not want to see the system changed. So they will find ways to dismiss what we do. And they'll just say we're rebels. And we say, no, we're not rebels. We're citizens of our country and citizens of our world who want to build a safe place for children and for future generations. Celia asked, how do you inspire children to become activists. That's what this conference is about. This is how your teachers, this is how inspire you. And I am here because you inspire me. We have to inspire each other. It gets hard. I was at a demonstration with some students. This was in 2004. And we were standing penned in for a long time. And one of the students said to me, how long have we been marching? And I said, for 40 years. And she said, no, I'm serious. And I said, Monica, I've been marching for 40 years. I've been marching now closer to 60 years. To keep marching, we have to inspire the young people and they have to inspire us. My grandchildren who are 16 years old, they march with me. There are a lot of youth leaders out there, and we truly believe the youth has a big part of changing the world we live in. How do you convince those who are still having a hard time believing the truth of what is happening in the world? Oh, I wish I had the answer to that one. There was an American politician and novelist. His name was Upton Sinclair. And he wrote in the 1900s. And in one of his books, he writes, it is very hard to convince someone to change their mind when their salary depends on not changing it. He's right. There are people who have benefited from inequality. There are people who benefited from the exploitation of the world. I think what changed in Philippines, though, because of the growing intensity of the typhoons, your government has become much more responsible to what you have to say. Over the next 20 to 30 years, it will be much harder for people in power to ignore us because the situation will only get worse. So you can't get discouraged because they will hear. You just have to keep organizing for our planet. Tristan asked about authoritarian governments. And that's a very difficult question because we see what's going on in Hong Kong right now, where young people have been arrested, leaders have been arrested. I have faith in non-violent civil disobedience. I have faith in organizing. I have faith in you, but I have faith in your parents. And I believe that you can help convince your parents. And I believe that your parents can help convince others. And in the Philippines, during the Marcos regime, the people of the Philippines brought down an unjust government, an authoritarian government. In the United States, there was tremendous fear that the Trump administration was bringing us to authoritarian government, and the people rose up and voted him out. So I have faith in people, and I think we don't have a choice other than to have faith that people united will not be defeated.